Hello and welcome to Adobe Illustrator Part 3. In this tutorial I'm going to be looking at how to make a lotus flower or a symbol for a lotus flower using the ellipse tool and a way of making a repeat pattern using the rotation tool. It's fairly straightforward, but I think it allows us to make a piece of artwork which is suitable for a logo or a pictogram in a fairly straightforward way, but one which has an outcome which is very striking and memorable. So let's give it a try. I have pre-prepared a blank page over to the left, and the first thing that we want to do is to get our toolbox up and running. There's our toolbox here. I like to have the toolbox as a side-by-side in pairs of tools on here rather than the long thin arrangement. For some reason this seems to be a little more understandable and easier to use, but it's up to you how to organize your workspace. I want to create an ellipse for one of the petals first of all. So I am going to go to the rectangle tool. I don't actually want the rectangle tool, but underneath it, if I click and hold, we have the ellipse tool, which is 3 down. And then once I've got the ellipse tool, I can draw what is going to be effectively my first petal. So I leave that, let that drop. Now, what I want at the top and at the bottom of the petal is a sharp edge. So to get a sharp edge on the top and the base of the petal, I'm going to take my cursor and bring it over to the pen tool. Click and drag on the pen tool, and I'm going to come down to convert anchor point tool. Once I've got that, just going to bring the tool across to the tip here. Click once, that gives us a nice sharp edge at the top. Click at the bottom, gives us the same shape at the bottom. That's going to be the beginnings of our overall petal shape. Now what I would like to do with this is to duplicate it and align it. Now I'm going to use the center of the page to do my aligning, and I'm going to show you how to do that with the toolbox over on the right hand side, the align toolbox. But first of all I want to duplicate the petal. So in order to duplicate on the keyboard, the shortcut is Command and Alt. Drag off to one side and let go. And I have my 2 petal shapes there, but I want this one to sit underneath this one here. So I'm going to select both of them, so they're both active. Then I'm going to come over to the Align tool, and I'm going to select Horizontal Align Center. So I'm going to click on that. That brings them one in front of the other. But I would like them to sit tip to tail. So I'm going to come over to the Align To tool, align to key object, which is going to allow us to align to one of these. Now I could select the top object, or I could select the bottom one. It's up to you which one you want to go with. I'll go for the bottom one for the minute. And then the distribute spacing, if I click on this icon here, we'll get vertical distribution. So that gives us our top and bottom. And then if I sort of weld them together, I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool down here, which gives us a number of shape modes. And the one that I am interested in is this one called Unite. And what will happen is when I click on the Unite button, these 2 separate objects will become one. They'll join together. So let's have a look. Click, and there we are. That should now be one object. And if I come over back to the alignment tool, click on the vertical alignment center tool there, that will bring this object into the middle of our A4 page. Although I suspect at the moment, with the length of the center to the outside, that's actually going to become wider than the page, but we can deal with that a bit later on. Okay, so we have our 2 petals. What we need to do now is to rotate them around to complete the entire flower head. So to do this, I need to go up to Effect at the top of the screen, and we're going to come down to there we are, Distort and Transform, and across and down to Transform itself. And there's a couple of very, very useful things in here. We've got the Rotate option, and I'm going to type in, let's have a look at 9 degrees, see what that looks like. Click on the preview. That gives us that looks good. And then see how that develops around the object. If I come up to the copies portion here, and I just press the up button, what will happen is as I increase the numbers one by one, just by pressing the up button, it will draw in more and more petals. For those of you that know anything about lotus flowers, you'll know that these, in fact, this is very stylized. The lotus flower doesn't have this many petals on it, only has about 8, but stylistically it'll be fine. So there's our complete geometric shape, and that, I believe, is called a guilloche or guilloche repeat pattern. Have a look on the internet for that. That's kind of an intriguing object or set of repeat patterns to be able to use. I understand it's used in when they are printing money as a kind of security device. The more complex these things are, the less easy it is to forge symbols on banknotes and so forth. So it's kind of used for that, amongst other things. So we've got our shape there. What we need to do now is to add a bit of color to it, or rather, I need to point out one thing before that, and that is when you select the object, if I go to the central petal that we started with, that's fine, I can select that. If I come out to these ones to select it, it won't let me select them. And that's because this central one is the actual drawing, and this around it is just a visual effect. So what we need to do is I need to tell it that we want all of these to become independent, separate items, objects. So I'm going to do that by going to Object and then down to Expand Appearance. And what hopefully will happen, there we are, they have all now become separate objects which are editable, which is exactly what we want. Let's get on to colouring them in then. The colour box down here, we've got stroke, this black outline object here. That allows us to give a line around the objects that we've drawn. To colour in the petals, we want this one here. This is the fill, which at the moment is on, got nothing in it. That red stripe symbolises transparency. There's no colour in it at all. And until we double click on that and choose a colour, and that will give us a colour which fills in the petal. There we are. But we could go around and fill those in, but what will happen is that they would each of these separate things would sort of cover over the next one, and we would begin to lose the detailing of the lines here. So we're going to use a slightly different technique, although that one does look quite promising. We need to use a different approach, and that is by using a tool which is around about midway down the toolbox, and it's called the Live Paint bucket. And what that does, when you select it, it'll fill in select portions that you've got in your flower, but it'll allow us to see all the other detailing around it as well. So it'll just, like for example here, that lozenge shape, although that's a combination of 3 separate objects which would normally be recognized separately, it will anticipate that we are just after these lozenge shapes here. But if I just click on it, it won't work. We first of all have to select all our objects so they become live, and then back to the paint bucket, the live paint bucket, and now we're able to drop some color into our shapes there, like that. So it is identifying each individual lozenge shape. And so we go around like that. I think what I want to do, lotus flowers are famous for being white rather than yellow, so I'm going to choose a much lighter color over here. Still not perfectly white, but if I then drop that in, that'll make a more convincing as it's going to be, given that it's got way too many petals. So that will give you your outside color, and then as I go to the middle of the flower, I'm going to come back and select a deeper tone, darker tone, bring that around there. And you don't have to have all of these colors as purely symmetrical. In those of you that are into painting, you can vary the color of these very subtly as you go around, so you get more of a realistic appearance. Go for a darker color again. And then you can just add more subtlety as you go. Work your way around. And that essentially is the technique that we're after to fill in the flower. It's all very stylized. And then if I click away, we've got this look, which is looking quite interesting. I still have the on the outside of each of the shapes, we've got the fill on the inside and we have the stroke on the outside. You may want to get rid of the stroke, although that is kind of interesting if you're going to produce something like stained glass window. If I select across those and I get rid of the stroke value, click away, you can see what we've got there. That's beginning to get more subtle, and it's quite an interesting piece of work underway if I zoom in. And you can still, if you go to the hollow arrow or the white arrow, the direct selection arrow, you can select smaller parts in order to drop in color. If you're working on something this small, and it's kind of easy to lose little bits of detail, you think, I want to drop some color in there, but I can't see what I'm doing. You can come up to view and down to outline, and that will give you a much clearer idea of where your objects are. So you can drop color into that much more subtly. Back to view, actually if I zoom out. And back to preview. That gives you my flower as far as I've gone. So it's up to you now to fill in these other shapes. If I select and drag across, we've got all the objects there. One of the advantages of having the stroke value is being able to see what you're doing. There we are. So put them back on just for the convenience of seeing where we're at. And there we go. Once you've completed that, grab the whole of the flower, and then we may want to shrink it down. When you go from the hollow arrow to the solid arrow, direct select, or the selection tool, because that's come out beyond the side of the page. I'm going to go into the corner, hold down Shift and drag it in, taking care once, just before you shrink it down, have a look at this tool here. This is the scale tool. If I double click on that, you must make sure that you have scale, stroke and effects on, otherwise what will happen is as you shrink the thing down, the relative value of the line will appear much thicker and you end up with a very out of proportion looking drawing. There we are. Scale that back up a bit so it's an end to get it centrally in the page. Don't forget we need to align up here, the align tool, and that will bring us into the center of the page, provided we've got artboard on here. There, there we are. Great stuff. Don't forget, trying to get rid of the stroke, click on the none, and there we are. Our lotus flower is well underway. Happy drawing in Adobe Illustrator.